On a Tuesday morning in December 2025, GitHub gave developers a price cut, 39% off. A real discount, the kind you screenshot. 6 paragraphs later, in the exact same blog post, they announced something else. They were going to start charging you to use your own computer, the Mac Mini in your closet, the server you bought, the power bill you already pay. 0.2 cents per minute. Every minute your machine ran a bill for them. 24 hours later, GitHub took it back. This is the story of the fastest corporate retreat in modern developer history, and the part nobody tells you. The people who actually won that day were not the ones tweeting. They were people who had been building something else, quietly, for 10 years. GitHub Actions is the foreman. Your runner is the worker. When you push code, the foreman queues a job. It hands the job to a worker. The worker compiles, tests, builds. The foreman collects the logs. There are 2 ways to hire a worker. 1. Rent a worker from GitHub. They call this a hosted runner. You pay per minute. GitHub buys the hardware. GitHub pays the power bill. 2. Bring your own worker. They call this a self-hosted runner. The Mac Mini under your desk, the Kubernetes cluster you already own, the dusty server in a Hetzner data center somewhere in Germany. If you bring your own worker, you pay for everything. Hardware, electricity, cooling, the internet connection, the IT person who fixes it at 2 a.m. But the foreman, the job queue, the secret store, the log routing, that part was free. It had been free since GitHub Actions launched in 2019. For 6 years, that was the deal. A free foreman. Your worker, your bill, your choice. That deal was about to change. Quietly. 3 weeks before the storm hit, a programming language quietly walked away. November 26, 2025. Andrew Kelley, the lead developer of Zig, posted a migration note. Zig was leaving GitHub, moving the main repository to Codeberg, a small nonprofit in Germany running open-source Forge software called Forgeo. He gave a quote that aged into prophecy. He called GitHub Actions, in his words, unreliable and neglected. He called the GitHub web interface, and I quote, some kind of bloated, buggy JavaScript framework. In leaving, Zig walked away from over $170,000 in GitHub sponsors revenue. From 2024 alone. Real money gone. On principle. People on Hacker News called it dramatic. They said Zig was overreacting. That self-hosting was painful. That nobody else would follow. 3 weeks later, GitHub posted that pricing change. And suddenly, Zig didn't look dramatic. Zig looked early. You may not know this yet, but the alternatives Andrew Kelley pointed at, Codeberg, Forgeo, GitHub, those names were about to do a lot of work. December 16, 2025. A Tuesday morning in San Francisco, the GitHub changelog publishes a post. The headline reads, Coming soon, simpler pricing and a better experience for GitHub Actions. Paragraph 1. The carrot. Hosted Linux runners drop from 0.8 cents per minute to 0.5 cents per minute. 39% off. Effective January 1st, 2026. Paragraph 6. The stick. Starting March 1st, 2026, a new charge applies to self-hosted runners in private repositories. 0.2 cents per minute. They call it the Actions Cloud Platform Fee. Read that again. GitHub was about to start metering compute that ran on hardware developers had already bought. In data centers, developers already paid for. On power bills, developers already wrote checks for. The discount on hosted runners was the sugar. The self-hosted toll was the pill. And there was no byline on the post. No CEO statement. No executive on Twitter saying, "Here's why we made this call." Just the GitHub changelog. Masthead, anonymous. The internet noticed. Within hours. Dawn, U.S. East Coast. A user named JC3 opens GitHub community discussion number 182089. The title is 6 words long. Per minute charges for self-hosted runners? WTF. Within hours, the thread is on fire. JC3 writes, and I quote, "Those minutes are my processing time. If it takes my machine 30 minutes to do a build, you're going to charge me for that when it places no load on your services." A user named BreitWR posts a single line, 131 upvotes. This pricing model is anti-competitive. A user named TX writes, "Complete insult to those of us who have been here for over a decade." By evening, Hacker News submission number 46291156 hits the front page. 802 points. 819 comments. Reddit r/programming and r/devops light up in parallel. A user named MarkMCW runs the math on his own bill. $3,500 a month. Extra for the privilege of using machines he already owned. Volunteer maintainers do the math next. Charity projects. Hobby projects. Donated hardware that runs slow on purpose. Per-minute billing punishes slow hardware harder. The free for open source promise was about to get an asterisk. By midnight, the thread had a verb attached to it. The community wasn't asking. They were leaving. Here's the part most coverage glossed over. 4 months earlier, in August 2025, GitHub's CEO, Thomas Dohmke, had announced he was leaving, going to become a startup founder again. He planned to stay through year-end. Microsoft did not name a successor. Instead, GitHub was folded into a new Microsoft organization called CoreAI. Reporting lines split. Revenue and engineering went to Julia Leosan, head of Microsoft's developer division. The chief product officer reported to Asha Sharma, VP of AI platform. The whole org reported up to Jay Parikh, a former Meta executive. There was, in effect, no CEO of GitHub the day the pricing storm hit. That is why the pricing post had no byline. That is why the retraction would have no byline. There was nobody to put their name on it. Developers noticed. The dots got connected. A faceless org chart entity inside Microsoft had just made a unilateral pricing call against the unspoken deal that had held for 6 years. There was no Nat Friedman to apologize, no Thomas Dohmke tweet to rally behind. The leadership vacuum did not cause the pricing post, but it shaped the response. It made the corporate we sound a little colder. It made the post feel less like a conversation and more like a memo from somewhere far away. December 17th, 2025, Wednesday morning. The Register publishes a piece. The headline, before GitHub itself has posted anything new, reads, "GitHub walks back plan to charge for self-hosted runners." Read that timing twice. A reversal was already telegraphed before it was public. A few hours later, GitHub publishes discussion number 182186. Title, Updates to GitHub Actions Pricing. Still no byline. The key sentence reads, "We've read your posts and heard your feedback. We're postponing the announced billing change for self-hosted GitHub Actions to take time to reevaluate our approach." Then the line that became the meme of the week. "We missed the mark with this change by not including more of you in our planning." Total elapsed time from announcement to public retraction. Under 24 hours, but notice the verb. Postponed, not canceled, not killed, not "we were wrong to want this." The original blog post was never withdrawn. It still sits live on GitHub's servers, only annotated. The hosted renter discount shipped on January 1st, exactly as scheduled. The carrot worked. GitHub got the public relations win of 39% cheaper actions without paying the cost of the stick. The door was propped open, quietly, with a doorstop. Here is what the headlines got wrong. The popular story is, the open source community spoke, GitHub listened, victory in 24 hours. That is the misconception. The community didn't really win. GitHub paused. The pricing post was never withdrawn. The structural reality didn't change. The financial pressure that produced the December 16th announcement still exists. Right now, inside the CoreAI org chart at Microsoft. So what actually won? The thing that won was not the 24 hours of tweets. The thing that won was the existence of credible alternatives. Codeberg, Forjo, GitLab, Gitea, Woodpecker CI. Names that had been quietly building for 10 years. Names that in any single year along the way looked like they were not winning. The 24 hours of revolt only worked because the threat of migration was real. And the threat of migration was only real because Andrew Kelley had moved Zig 3 weeks earlier, because Codeberg's membership had quietly doubled in 2025, because Forjo had been forked from Gitea in late 2022 and just kept shipping. A decade of unglamorous infrastructure work paid off in a single day of leverage. That is the lesson, and here is the personal reflection. Trust is infrastructure. Once eroded, it is hard to rebuild. As developers, we are the infrastructure of the modern world. The terminals you keep open, the servers you maintain, the repositories you mirror. The boring backup nobody asks about, those are the things that buy you bargaining power on the day the platform changes the deal. Notice when a platform makes you feel played. That is not a bug. That is the business model. And notice the boring work somebody is doing right now with no audience that nobody is tweeting about. Because the next 24-hour revolt is already being seeded somewhere. In a small repository, in Germany maybe, with a small team that nobody calls dramatic. Yet, December 2021, late afternoon, somewhere in Asia, a security researcher is testing a chat command on a Minecraft server. They type a few characters. The server logs the message. Then the server reaches out across the open internet and downloads code from a stranger. That tiny moment was a 0 day. In a logging library that almost every Java application on Earth was running. It was called Log4 Shell. By the next morning, every CTO with a Java backend was in a war room. Banks, governments, cloud providers. The internet had a hole in it the size of a planet sitting inside a library nobody had thought about for years. You'll want to be in that war room next.